Hey everybody, it is Andrew Slack and Forrest Hansen for another episode of Oh good, Alpha's already here and he's pitching angry face. That's cool.
Mashing that angry face
That's
button.
amazing. Um Jesus, man. So yeah, Forrest, why don't we do the thing we just talked about and share the thing? This is how we start. Uh because it
Yeah, I
does.
think I just shared it to my page.
Okay, good. That's all you need to do really. So minor announcements and cool shit. Forrest, you had suggested that we make this into a podcast, and then we got where did this go? We got a couple other people requesting the exact same thing. So we are in. I did that. We have a podcast thing now. It will be available through SoundCloud as of today. After this, once I render this current episode, and in keeping with that, whoa, don't do that. In keeping with that, because Facebook is such a pain in the ass, like they don't actually let you download your videos. I have to rip it off of another service. Uh, it'll just take me a hot second, is all I'm really saying. And then next week we're gonna go on a different format. You can still watch it on Facebook, but it will be through the Twitch service. So if you're not a member on Twitch, go do that. It takes 5 seconds. I'll be posting links all week. If you have a Facebook account, you have a Twitch account. Yeah. I'm exhausted. I'm
Why are you exhausted, buddy?
I'm exhausted, Forrest, because well, I just came from one of the hardest training days I've ever had. And we have a we have a yoga teacher who comes into my gym, and she never does like peaceful cool down yin, you just whipped your ass yoga. It's always great, you lifted several hundred pounds, now do warrior 7 and throw your cloaca over your neck like a scarf, and now breathe and don't hate life, it'll be great. I always
I'm
feel
not sure what a cloaca is,
it
but
is
I'm
an
rolling with
all-purpose orifice that birds have.
it. You know it's going to be a good one when we started with
I
orifice.
know, I'm sorry.
Just anytime you begin with the word orifice, we're good to go.
Well, why would you start with anything else? It's where we all came from. Okay, I'm being awkward, just like more than usual. Did that not save? Oh,
Did which not say?
our
Did what
did
not say?
I shared our thing and it's just not doing.
I think that. Give me 1 second. I'll see if it. Yeah, it's on my page at the very least.
Weird.
I don't know if
Okay.
if it gets that like push it up the page thing. We've got a fewer people watching than we have in the past,
No,
so
I know.
maybe it's a
It's
tougher
just
to
not
find.
sharing on my page. Anyway, so we're talking today about. So last week was kind of a heavy episode, and I can't thank Shanti or Forrest enough for being willing to talk about everything we talked about. I loved it. I went back and watched. It's the only episode I've watched fully through a second time so
Hey,
far. Mainly because I usually can't stand hearing myself talk, and luckily it was mostly you and Shanti. So this week it's going to be a little bit lighter, but I still really want to encourage everybody to participate. Please give your 2 cents, and some of this is probably going to hit people a little closer to home, and other things are just going to be like, huh, good info. We're talking
hmm
about training. We're talking about goals. It's a really important topic to me in general, but especially in West Coast. So let's start with the easy stuff. Like Forrest, when you started doing the West Coast swing, did you have any goals whatsoever? If so,
doing
what?
the West Coast swings.
Yes.
Yeah. Um, well, I think that when I first started, my very first goal ever was to look less like a ballroom dancer, which is which is pretty ironic if you think about it, because I think that people have this battle with their other training, because most of us who come to West Coast Swing often come from another dance.
Yeah.
It's relatively few people's first dance.
Yeah.
And there's this kind of battle between integrating the skills that you have from that dance and not looking like an ex dancer, whether that be a ballroom dancer or a salsa dancer or a hip hop dancer or
Sure.
whatever. And that was definitely something that I struggled with. So that was sort of my very, very first goal. I think that my first goal before that was to make some friends, which is
Yeah.
a pretty good first goal. Because you're in this whole new community of people and you wanna meet people. And so I think that was probably where I started. So very, very simple. But how about you?
I just wanted to dance at first, and in terms of like being called, you say like I don't want to look as much like a ballroom dancer. Um, that shit still happens.
Hmm.
Like, do you still get called a ballroom dancer? I definitely still get people
Yeah.
saying
Oh,
like,
for sure.
yeah, okay. So I still get people like, oh, you do Lindy Hop. I'm like, yeah. What? Can we just dance? Is this a thing?
The
Like,
best part is when like you're in process in a dance with somebody and they're like, "So do you have an X background?" And I'm just like, "Holy hell, man, just do
yeah.
the dance."
Actually, I come from the adult film industry, and I'm just good at moving my hips. That's right. That's why you strike all those poses.
That's why we started with the orifices.
It's going to be a weird episode, I feel. So
You started
I'm
it.
sorry. Yeah, Katrina, yeah, could you make a shirt that says throw your cloaca over your neck like a scarf? It's great. It's a magical
One day
orifice.
I will learn how to throw my cloaca around. I like how it was right then that the 15-year-old joined. Perfect
Who's the
timing.
15 year
Thanks,
old?
Laurel. Thanks for waiting until right then. I appreciate
Who's the
that.
15-year-old? Who do I. You know what? I don't.
Laurel Walker is 15 or 16. It's one
Well,
or the other.
okay, cool. This is. There's dirty words on
It's a
this show.
family-friendly show. It's a
It is,
family-friendly
but it's like
show.
my family, which means there's a lot of F words. So we're very Italian slash Jewish
Fair enough.
slash yeah.
Fair enough.
So yeah. Anyway, when I started, I mean, I went to a West Coast thing on accident a long time ago. I was like 15, and I thought we were going to like East Coast swing because I thought East Coast was like the penultimate dance, you know. And I was wrong. Turns out, and they were.
Well, no, you're right. It's just that West Coast is the ultimate dance.
Uh, yeah, good job. It's so good. You don't need to fucking triple step. You don't need to respect boundary. Never mind.
All right. We have to
I'm sorry.
wind our way
I'm
back.
sorry.
We have to bring it in.
So the
Bring
first
it
goal,
in.
okay, the first goal that I had was to look decent at what I was doing. I didn't care if it still included whatever I was already doing. And actually, the first couple Doug Groom, as long as we're like 70% swing podcast content, I'm in. The rest can be
I
whatever.
respect that.
Yeah, if Doug, if you can define what swing content is for me, that'd be great. So,
This is a classic podcast division. It's not a showcase
okay,
podcast division.
the nothing uplifting. See what I did there?
Yeah. Nice. I like that
Thank
one.
you.
That's awesome. Nothing uplifting.
So yeah, and the first lesson that I had, and the first like two people that were nice to me were Miles Monroe. He was the first lesson, and he was a G. He was just so cool, and it was the first time I'd seen somebody do like did like this amazing couple sets of jazz turns, and he did a leap, and I was like, oh yeah, okay, this is for me.
Yeah, you can actually do some dancing in this dance.
Yeah, and then Wayne Bott, I've talked about it before, but he was like the first person who really like he was checking in with me all weekend. So it was just they made it seem like it was a cool thing to do, a possible social outlet that would be positive and uplifting. And I just wanted to look like I kind of knew what I was doing. So I worked really hard for a whole weekend, and I went from looking like kind of the guy who, you know, would fall over at best, trying to have poise that isn't back into my ass. Like not athletic, not aggressive, you know what I mean? Like the Lindy Hop thing. To actually looking like I kind of knew what I was doing. I looked like novice, I guess. What was your second goal? We're just going to work through this, and maybe if something interesting pops out.
We're gonna go through the progression of goals over time.
Yeah,
I
like I
it.
said, I want a nice, peaceful episode.
Yeah.
Oh, hang on. Shout out to Georgina Kraft. Tuning
Watching
in.
from Australia.
Yes!
That is pretty dope.
That's fantastic. Sorry.
We
go
have
on.
we have one of our first international viewers. I like it.
Yeah.
No, Alpha Canada does not count.
Oh.
It's America's hat. It's a different kind of thing.
Jeez!
So for the second goal that I had,
What is this
man.
episode, man? Like,
Well, my second goal is to get out of novice.
okay.
To be perfectly frank, because that was back in the days where I cared about divisions.
Yeah.
And it is funny how there's this kind of like inverse relationship between how much you care about divisions and which division you happen to be in.
Yeah.
Because I think that you get when you're a novice, you're like, oh, I really want to get out of novice. Then you're an intermediate, like, okay, I really want to get out of intermediate. Then you get to advanced, and you're like, but do I really want to dance an all star?
Yeah.
But do I? I don't know. And then you get to All Star, and you're just like, well, now I'm in the elephant graveyard. Um, and it's kind of just sort of over at that point. So that inverse points relationship definitely exists to this day until you get to that weird spot where you're like not really in champs, but you're like kind of straddling the boundary.
Yeah.
And at that point, kind of divisions start to matter again. But for me, yeah, getting out of novice was a big one. It took me about a year. I think it took me about 9 months. I didn't compete very much, but in that period of time, but it took a long time for me to start making finals, and I think that's something that might be a thing that we can talk about.
Yeah, that'd be
Because in
great.
the first event I ever went to, oh, what was that?
I said that would be great.
Yeah, first event I ever went to, I made the semifinal. I did not make the final. It was at Boogie in 2010.
Yeah.
Oh dear God. Yeah. So geez, that was a while ago. So I made like semis or something, and I did not make a final. And then I didn't make a final for a long time. And I think that my first final was sometime in 2011, maybe at like Capital or something.
Okay.
And then, as it happens for a lot of people, like I went to Fresno and I made the final for like my second time ever, and then I drew a great partner and I won.
Who was
And bam, I was out of novice.
Do you remember who your partner was?
I do, but she doesn't really dance anymore. It was a foreign dancer. I believe that she was from Eastern Europe, and I remember her well. I'm forgetting her name, but I haven't seen her in a really long time. And I was fortunate enough to do that. I just kind of got out, and I think that for a lot of people, that's kind of how it happens. But that one moment for when it happens with the getting out of novice is pretty variable.
Yeah.
So it can just take a reasonable amount of time, and I'm dancing at whatever level I'm dancing at now, and it took me 9 months to get out of novice. It took me about a year to get out of intermediate.
Yeah.
Probably about 18 months to get out of advanced.
Okay.
So
Let's play this game. What do you think you need to do to get out of novice?
are you a leader or follow in this theoretical example?
Let's do both.
If
Speaking
you're
as
a
an avid follow.
Speaking as a follower. No, I'm not a follower. I wish I were a better follower.
Yeah, me too.
Speaking as a leader, to get out of all right. So I'm gonna rewind
Sure.
a little bit.
Yeah.
For both roles, you need a certain amount of luck. And here's what I mean by that. In novice, if you're competing entirely in divisions that have large fields, a certain amount of the game is just being seen.
Yeah.
I'm not going to pretend that I judge all the time. I don't. But in the times that I've judged, I've gained a lot more appreciation for how difficult judging is.
Yeah.
And particularly in a situation where you have a 100% field and you've got like 5 heats and you got to remember what happened in the first heat.
Yeah.
And so on and so forth. Like that's really tough. And then what often happens in novice is that somebody will come up to me afterwards and they'll be like, oh, why, like, you didn't have me in the final, you had them in the final, what's the difference between me and them? And reasonable question, totally legitimate question. And I say basically something to the effect of really not a lot.
Okay.
Because what you often see in novice is you see that there's this group at the very top and there are a bunch of people that you know are not going to make finals.
Right.
And then there's this huge group in the middle.
Why?
There's not really that much difference between like the 7th person into finals and the 20th person.
Yeah.
And at that point, you're just kind of splitting hairs. So your goal has to be to get into that top group.
Yeah.
And the way that you do that is by consistent effort on your dancing, in my opinion. Like technically, probably being on time helps, standing up straight helps, respecting your partner helps. But really for both roles, it's about putting the time into your dancing at that level.
Yeah. I mean, I hate that luck is like, quite honestly, the first operative, even before like you're a decent dancer, before you're on time. It's just that threat to be, or the what is it? The scramble to be seen. Nick Williams is this brilliant Lindy Hopper. He's been around forever, and I used to follow him and train with him for a little bit, and he has this really awesome advice that I'm totally ripping off here, but it's build a costume for one, then build a vocab. He had, at the time when he was winning most things, he would always be that guy who was wearing the white suit with the black and white shoes, with the black shirt, with the white tie. Everybody knew Nick's costume. And then he had two moves that he would do constantly. It was the switch foot thing, and then this bizarre, like, sort of barrel roll in the sky, drop onto some knee. Like, he had a very specific move set. And so you knew that even if you didn't know the guy, oh, I've heard about this. Okay, that's flashy. That's Nick. Gotcha. He built a thing for himself. So like that. So I took that advice when I was trying to get out of novice, because I am an attention whore and I really want to perform. And I knew that, I knew that novice was not the place. It is not. You get very few spotlights. You get very little attention paid to you, and that's totally fine. But I wanted to be at least all-star. I wanted to show off and have people cheer for me and get good enough that I could entertain people. It's totally selfish. And there's still a little bit of that going on every time we're on the line. Like, I just want to perform for people. Yeah. Go on.
No, I think that for me, like, I definitely, like, relatively quickly, my goal was definitely to make it to All-Star eventually. And I think that many people view that as kind of like the end of their journey. And I think kind of an interesting contrast is the difference between, like, our competitive performative journey and your training journey. Because for me, my real experience was that I felt like I got to All-Star, and that's where I started learning how to dance.
Yeah, I feel that.
In this dance. Yeah, for a couple of reasons. The first was because I had established a sufficient base of knowledge to be able to start to bring more into this dance.
Yeah.
And then also I think that what you see people make All-Star and kind of one of two things happens. The first thing that happens is that they vanish into the ether.
Yeah.
Because we as a community do a pretty bad job of retaining dancers who make it to All-Star, because if you've just danced to advanced in competition to this point, there is nowhere left to go. You are stuck.
Yeah.
1% of people who dance in All-Star will make it to champions as a consistent champions dancer.
Yeah, I've got a question for you when you're done, so remind me.
Sure, yeah. Great, I will. So for anyways, or the alternative is that you get to All-Star and you go, holy shit, the largest gap between two divisions is between All-Star and champs.
Yeah.
Period, end of story. The gap between advanced and All-Star is relatively small, to be frank with you. Particularly the gap between, like, the top people in advanced and the people who have just gotten into All-Star. It's the same people. Yeah. It's just a function of how often you compete. It's just a function of how long you've been dancing for. There's very little technical difference. And so that would be an encouragement to advanced dancers. Watch your peers, but also watch the All-Stars and watch the people who've just made it into that division and go, oh, wait, it isn't that scary after all. Because it's the same effing people. There's no difference.
Yeah. I would submit
there
that
are many people.
You should do that regardless of your level, especially in All-Star for the other All-Stars. Like, I like to use PJ Turner as an amazing example a whole lot, because PJ will go out there and kill it and be calm, and he'll pay attention and he'll do his thing. And then, like, the very next, usually it's a lead. Usually, like, I'll go out or whoever, and it'll just be like a hype song. And instead of just waiting for those right moments, I'm going to hit every single thing. And then
you're just going.
Yeah. And then usually PJ kicks our ass. Like, there's no mystery to his magic. He works hard and he pays attention. He's calm. So anyway, go on.
No, I mean, that was sort of the end of the thought, where it's just that for me, what was nice about making it to All-Stars, all of a sudden I wasn't really worried about advancing anymore. I was just worried about improving. And there are very few people who do this dance in, like, a very serious, committed way.
Sure.
And we talk about that sometimes, but it's really true. It's a really small community. So if you decide to be one of the people who do this dance in a serious, committed way, you can move really quickly.
Yeah.
sometimes I think that that's not the best thing when that movement is purely about advancing in level as opposed to improving your dancing.
Sure.
Because if you improve your dancing, you will eventually advance in level. If you advance in level, you won't necessarily improve your dancing.
Well, in
I could
theory,
be
I
a
mean,
novice tomorrow, and I would be the same dancer.
I see what you're saying. Yeah,
Yeah.
I mean, yeah, I see what you're saying. I was taking it a completely different way. I have a question for you. So you're saying that there's not a whole lot of reason, essentially, for All Stars to stick around. So, do you have anything off the top of your head, or maybe I know we've talked about this before, like incentives for All Stars to stay?
God, it's a great question. I wish I had like the perfect answer to
I
that
think any answer is
because
good.
yeah, I mean, I think it's really tough because honestly, so not to have sort of an unfun answer, but a lot of the problem is a financial one.
Yeah,
There's not a lot of money to be made in West Coast Swing. I think that we all are conscious of this.
uh huh,
So there's not a lot of economic incentive to become an all-star dancer.
yeah,
And particularly given the amount of training, the amount of effort, the amount of whatever that it takes to make it to all-star in the first place.
yeah,
Most people who are an all-star are net negative on this dance, and net
yeah.
negative by like a considerable amount of money. Um, so opportunities to work, opportunities to make back some of that investment, opportunities locally, and I think that a lot of it is kind of on all of us, and some of it's on the all stars that are complaining about not being able to make money.
I
Because hey,
agree.
if you just went out there and really decided that I'm going to try to build a community locally, that's probably your fastest way to an actual living income in this dance is
Yeah,
a local community. Um, the being a touring professional sounds wonderful in theory, and there are like 30 people in the world who can actually do it,
yeah,
um, and actually make like a living wage
yeah,
from doing it. Outside of that, like everyone else who makes a living wage as a dance instructor does so locally. They have a local dance, they teach every Wednesday, and they book 10 privates a week,
yeah.
and they cross their fingers. And then that's sort of the process. But
But that's being an artist, you know. I
yeah,
wish,
that's the nature of the beast.
yeah, I wish it weren't. Um, there's a number of people here, for example, who take advantage of that, and like they expect you to pay to teach or pay to audition for things, and that's ludicrous. But like it was the same way when football started. You know,
Sure.
my grandfather actually was on the championship Bears back when they were Leatherheads. Like I have his helmet.
What?
Oh yeah, I have his helmet.
All
And
right, well, fun facts about Andrew Slack. He comes from a long legacy of champion footballers.
yeah, look at me go. Look how swollen I am. And
I don't know, you're getting pretty swole, buddy.
I no joke. I was at my tattoo guy yesterday, and he poked me in the pec and said, "You're looking pretty yoked." And no one has ever said that to me in my whole life. So I giggled.
And you got a little warm and flustered.
I did. I got flustered. He's a handsome devil, and he's going to be stabbing me in the arm with a lot of needles tomorrow. So it'll be fun. Before I say what I was going to say, Vivian has said a couple things now. Vivian Young says, my initial goal was
Yeah.
to work toward becoming comfortable with any lead. I didn't care what I looked like, and I just concentrated on understanding what I should be doing. It was my focus for about a year. I just wanted to echo that because I like how you wrote that. And then Vivian added, Forrest, when you say that all-stars leave the scene, are you speaking just of their no longer attending conventions?
Yes.
Or are they also disappearing from local dances? She addressed it to you.
I mean, I'm sure that Andrew probably also has a perspective on this, but the
But
short
she
answer
addressed it
is
to
yes.
you.
Yes, she did. So I will respond. Yeah, the short answer is yes. Yes to both. They are also disappearing from local dances. I think that particularly I've heard from some people that this has been a thing in LA recently and in the Southern California scene,
Yeah.
where there has been not like an exodus or anything, but just the weekly dances are becoming a little bit less populated with the people who've been doing it for a while,
Yeah.
for lack of a better way of putting it. I would say that in the Bay Area, as we kind of talked about with Shanti a little bit on the last episode, there's definitely been a kind of lightening over time
Sure.
of people showing up to the Tuesday every week, and that's natural, like people join a hobby, they leave a hobby. I don't think there's anything inherently wrong with that.
Yeah.
And you're not going to retain every person. Like ultimately, this is a thing that people do because they enjoy it. And there are plenty of hobbies that I've had throughout my life that I don't do very much of today.
Yeah.
That's not necessarily like a a critique of the hobby. It's just sort of the nature of life.
Yeah.
That being said, I think it's a fair question that we should ask ourselves. Why is it that so many upper level dancers seem to decide that they don't want to dance anymore? And there's a category where we can't do anything about it, and there's a category where we can. And I think that there are things that we can do.
Yeah, I mean, if you're just burnt out on a thing, it's inevitable. You know, you're not going to go to it. Maybe you come back, or maybe you don't. I've done that a couple times. So, but in terms of just incentives that people can give, I mean, at the very lowest, attention. I know that sounds, let's call it shitty, but
no, it's super true.
I mean, we were talking about it here in town. It was like me and Chris on and Babak and Corinne and Delancey. We were all talking about kind of our scene and like basically like without, this is mostly my opinions here, that like why are we not like cheering each other on? Why do we not hype each other up as much? You know, make it more fun for what we're doing. If somebody does an awesome move in a thing, like why don't we ask how they did that? You know, there's not really a lot of give and take, and compared to other forms that I'm in at currently. You know, there's a weird lack of knowledge in general, or lack of want to gain new knowledge, I find, from, you know, people. And we're talking about training today. And so let's use you as an example. Like when you do something that like you have this flight about you and your movement, I want to know how that is possible. I want, you know, because we're not built the same. You're a little bit lankier than I am. You have different poise than I do. I want to know how you move your body in the off chance that I may be able to devour your sweet, succulent talent and add it to my own.
Okay.
Yeah.
Sounds delicious.
I know. And one of my favorite memories is when you and I were up at the Sturgeon Creasy Pig Roast, whatever.
Yes. Yeah.
Multiple titles. When I was just like, we were jamming out, and from the back right, I hear Forrest go, "Get it, Andrew!" And I was like, yeah, that's my guy.
Just like that.
It was. You have a very shrill yet comforting scream that I adore when you're hyped.
Should I put that on my business card? Shrill yet comforting.
Yeah.
Can we get a shrill yet comforting shirt? I would wear that shirt. I would wear that shirt everywhere. Shrill yet comforting. Mark it down. That's my favorite one so far.
What I'm saying is, there's like, well, for one, there's no question why I hang out with you. And that is just part of it, is that I know that I will be supported by you if I do something neat. I love that Katrina's already like, done. We're making the shirt.
It's the best one. Shrill yet comforting.
Grizzled hips, crunchy bits, shrill yet comforting. And I really want to hashtag.
I feel like shrill yet comforting could literally be like our show slogan. That's fantastic.
It's true.
But I hear what you're saying.
If we meter it out to just you and me, it would be bullshit and eloquent. So I keep telling you though, like
eloquence.
I'm telling you, people keep coming up to me. They're like, Forrest Hanson is so eloquent. You're there too. I'm like, yeah, I know. I'm there too. It's fine.
You are the spoon that stirs the drink, my friend.
Oh, I love when we spoon
for the entertainments.
I do. So anyway.
All right, so you were talking about that kind of like mutual veneration.
Yes.
Yeah. No, I mean totally. I think that if you watch most solo dances, for instance, whether it's a battle or it's a performance or it's just like the end of a class. If you've ever been to a solo dance class, normally what happens at the end is you split the class into two halves and they perform the combo, whether it's jazz or contemporary or hip hop or whatever. And one side kind of watches the other do it. And often there's a lot of yelling and a lot of, just very, very obvious support for the art.
Yeah.
And I think that kind of speaks to something that's sort of important, which is that you are so exposed when you're dancing.
Yeah.
And you are even more exposed when you're doing West Coast Swing than when you're doing other forms of dancing because there's no choreo.
Yeah.
We are grading an improvised movement.
Yeah.
And you don't do that in most other forms of dance. And some of them you do, but most of them you don't. So that just kind of makes it even more important for us to be supportive of one another. I think there is kind of a happy middle place here because it's like you don't want to be over top about it, and I think that there's a way in which our dance, because of the spotlight format, has sort of pushed itself towards this hyper performativeness that because that's kind of like what gets the cheers from the audience. But I think that like if we're just kind of smart about it, we can sort of weed out some of the total flash and trash
Yeah, sure.
and show like full and complete appreciation for the parts of the dancing that are legitimately dope and that we don't necessarily support as much as we could. So I think you're making a great point.
Well, thank you. And in terms of flash and trash in general, like if you're working, we've said it a few times in a bunch of different ways. If you're working so hard to get like that one move across or that one point across, it's going to be much less interesting than if it just flows out naturally. So even if you're constantly performing, which I feel like I am, it will taper itself down, or you won't get attention, or you won't win, or people won't want to dance with you, frankly. So, Forrest Hansen, what do you do to train? Do you train regularly? And I'm talking like, this can be like I go to the gym so I feel like better with my body, or
Sure.
it's like I practice
Like,
X moves.
what do I do to work on my dancing?
Indeed.
Yeah. Okay. So I'm going to preface this by saying that over the last couple of months, I've done less than I've wanted to do, because I've had a lot of work stuff. But generally speaking,
Yes, Forrest released a book. It's called Resilient: How to Grow an Unshakable Core of Calm, Strength, and Happiness. You can buy it on Amazon right now. I've got my copy right here. Okay, moving on.
yeah. Anyways, thank you for that, Andrew.
Yeah, anytime.
Okay.
Every
So generally
time.
speaking, I'm gonna draw a strong line, and a lot of people have done this between social dancing and working on your dancing. Because often when I'm social dancing, I'm not working on my dancing. Sometimes I will try to be active about being thoughtful
Yeah.
when I'm social dancing, which I do once or twice a week in general. Um, but I think that for me, like focused practice is a very different thing from working on social dance stuff. Um, Generally, what I'll do is for one of the best things for my West Coast swing dancing has been working on other dances.
Yeah.
So I try to go to a solo dance classes when I can, often a couple times a month. Also, the routine work that I do with people or setting up practice sessions with people. I probably try to practice like focusedly, in a focused manner on my West Coast swing, probably about once a week,
Nice.
with another person, if at all possible.
Mm-hmm.
And I know that, for instance, when I was working on the doll routine with Chantal, that was really, really helpful for my West Coast. Um, Even though it wasn't West Coast swing at all, it's 0% West Coast
Still
swing.
partnering.
Yeah, it's still partnering. It's still, you're stretching your mind, you're working through cool positions. We were doing sort of a fusion routine that forced me to kind of think outside the box in various ways.
Yeah.
And while I was doing that piece, I got a lot of comments from people like, wow, you feel really good right now. And it was because I was just actively engaging my body on a regular basis. Along those lines, I go to the gym 2 to 3 times a week, on days when I'm not dancing and I'm not going to the gym. Try to either give myself a break or I try to do something vaguely athletic, whether that's going on a walk or that's doing 15 minutes of body weight exercises at home or whatever it might be. And I find all of those really helpful. I found that some of the best advice that I've heard about training is from Brandy, as much great advice is often from.
Yes.
She's pretty good at that.
Ah.
And her thing is that I want to do 15 minutes a day.
Yeah.
I don't care where I am.
Yeah.
I don't care what I'm doing. I don't even really care if I have my dance shoes on. I could be standing in my kitchen and I just want to work on my dancing in a focused way where I'm attacking like one thing for 15 minutes a day. And if you add those 15 minutes up over the course of a week or a month, let alone over a year or 10, 15 years, that's a lot of work on your dancing. So I think that that's a really good practice. And also that kind of regular repetition really establishes a habit that I think could be super useful for most people.
Yeah. I mean, yeah.
How do you work on your stuff, buddy?
I work out a lot.
Yeah.
I do mostly CrossFit because it's 20 minutes to 30 minutes of my life, and then I can go do other things. I'm a coach now, and so I do that 3 or 4 times a week. it helps me stay incredibly mindful of my injuries, and and on top of that, it's I dance wise I'm training every single day right now except for Sunday.
That's awesome.
Yeah, I'm very happy. I'm training every day except for Sunday because I just need one day to not do anything and to feel like an awesome slob, so I can recoup.
It's good to have slob days.
It is.
I support slob days.
Yeah. And actually, I don't specifically work on West Coast all that much. Delancey and I started working actually just last week. Hey, Chris Snyder, how you doing? But last week it honestly consisted of us, because we both needed like sort of a night off. We sat down, we opened a bottle of wine, and we critiqued videos and talked about the finer points of what was going on, what we liked, what we didn't like, and talked about philosophy behind what we've learned. And it was super, it was so helpful. And then mostly every day is a slob day for me. That's not true. You just did a routine, Chris, up at the thing in Seattle. What's it called? Easter.
Seattle Easter swing.
April Fool dance sensation or whatever. And
yes.
Anyway, mostly what I'm working on is mindfulness and allowing myself to be terrible, because I done this.
All right. So we should talk about that in a second, but keep going.
Yeah,
that I think is super important.
Yeah, I agree. Mostly it's just trying to keep a healthy, positive mental attitude, especially when I feel so down, and allowing myself to feel terrible and to have bad days and to not be quote unquote perfect or whatever that means to me. And I know I just hyped your book, but really there's many reasons we're friends, and there's many reasons I look up to you, and you have such a keen mind. So another plug, I recommend this book. Not because he's my friend, but because it really is good.
All roads come back to the book. I like it.
Not all, just 50.
Okay.
Yeah.
Good.
I also recommend everybody should try a type of therapy called EMDR.
Okay. Yeah.
Yeah. It's incredible. It got me through a bunch of trauma. And also, like, to not be ashamed of just going. If you need to talk to somebody who is a neutral third party, go get some therapy of whatever kind you want. Just a counselor, somebody to talk to who has no vested interest in you other than it's their vocation. That's mostly all I do. I'm constantly working. Constantly. Mm-hmm. Yeah. So what, you perked up on something. Why don't you go off of that?
Yeah, I perked up on like several things, because you touched a lot of huge pieces there. Last week was the therapy episode, so I'm not going to make this week the therapy episode.
They're kind of all the therapy episode.
Well, yeah, I mean, my dad's a clinical psychologist. Yeah. Every episode is the therapy episode.
And you can get his clinical psychology in the new book, Resilient, by Rick Hansen, P.H.
That was great.
Speaking of which,
I do need to support it.
Hang on, I do need to hype our sponsor this week, because I haven't done that yet.
Great.
Every time we have a sponsor, it's in the bottom left of the show. But those of you listening to this as a podcast, which yes, we have a podcast,
Black Rose Fitness,
Black Rose Fitness Society. We're here in Portland, Oregon. We're open every day but Sunday. Come by. It's amazing. Best thing I've done for my health. Okay, so please continue.
Physical work is a great form of therapy. I'm going to spend 1 second on various therapeutic bullshit, and then we can move on to more dancey stuff.
Sounds good.
Therapy is great. And in general, there's kind of a stigma in this country that if you go to therapy, it means that something's wrong with you.
Yeah.
That's deeply fundamentally flawed. We all have material that builds up over time, and therapy is not about, you have a intense personality disorder or something, although of course it could be for that. It's just about I have a limiting belief that's problematic for me in some way, or it's about I have a tendency that's grown over time, or maybe it's based on the vestige of childhood in some way or something like that. And it would be helpful to talk to somebody about it that I know is going to be completely safe, and I know it's never going to hurt me, and I know that it's not going to infiltrate my personal life.
Yeah.
And that's a really valuable thing to have. I've done courses of therapy. Many of my friends have. It's perfectly normal, and it's a really wonderful tool. So that's the only thing I'm going to say about that for right now. You said something really great a second ago, Andrew, which was the giving yourself like the freedom to be bad. And I think that that's like an incredibly powerful tool in our dancing, and particularly in spotlights. It's
Yeah.
we've remarked on this kind of in the past on some of the other episodes, but it's kind of like the Brandy line about like you can't have an amazing dance unless you're willing to have a boring dance.
Yeah.
But even maybe a little bit more than that, there's probably my favorite phrase about dancing and about really any kind of training is you have to go through stupid to get to cool.
Yeah.
And so many people are afraid to go through stupid because stupid doesn't feel very good.
Right.
Stupid feels pretty stupid. And when we move our body in a new way, it often feels uncomfortable. But if you're trapped at a certain level and your dancing's not improving,
Yeah.
it's because you're not moving your body in a new, different way
Yeah.
or in a more proper way or whatever it might be. So you have to go through that period of discomfort in order to get any gain from your pain.
Yeah.
And I think that that's a really important thing to kind of grok and to go, look, I'm just going to try to really change what I'm doing. And it's going to feel weird and stupid and uncomfortable and dumb. I'm going to have social dance nights where I go social dancing and I just feel really crappy about my dancing for a minute. But I'm going to push through that. I'm going to keep on trying to engage the experiment. And eventually it'll probably get better.
Yeah.
So I just wish that people were kind of more open to that, because I think that that's a really, really important tool for learning.
Yeah. And I mean, a portion of what you're talking about too is just owning whatever the hell happens. Things are,
Oh, for sure.
and maybe not ultimately, but like I purposefully will choreograph my contemporary routines or my jazz routines to have awkward stuff. And that was like a very big thing for Bob Fosse. He's my hero for jazz. And he didn't have perfect feet, and neither do I. He had terrible feet, and so do I, and bad hips, and he wasn't flexible naturally. But his rhythm was amazing, and he had great ideas. So, so he would choreograph, like Gentleman's Frug, or making fun of high society and putting you in these awkward angles, or just his inherent style is very pigeon-toed with a lot of, stuff like that. He would do these things to glorify the issues that he had, to make use of them. And I try my best to do that because I know that like my posture isn't always the best. I have a tendency to hold a lot of stress in my diaphragm. It pulls me forward. So I try to, when I feel that, I get a little bit more liquid into my next movement. And like, I try to pay a very close attention to what the hell is wrong with me that day, so to speak, and use it as a weapon, I guess. A tool,
Yeah, no,
a tool
totally.
would be a better term.
Well, you were talking earlier about like having a signature,
Yeah.
and that signature can be a pattern, it can be a style, it can be a form of dress. But the purest signature that any of us have is our own body.
Yeah.
Like your body's your instrument, and we all have different bodies. So you have to kind of find what works for you.
Yeah.
And sometimes there are imperfections in the body or in our technique or in whatever it might be. And those imperfections can actually turn into elements of style.
Yeah.
And I think that you see a lot of that if you watch the champions. Like they all, like the top champions of this dance, all evolved their style through the lens of their own body.
Sure.
And through the lens of their learning experience and through the lens of just what they happen to like. So they all look pretty different. So it's definitely not a dance where we have to get fixated on like quote unquote a right way of doing things.
Yeah. Which is funny because like the thing that most people hold so dear in this is like winning competitions in a very ill-defined ill-defined set of rules as to what is right and what is wrong.
Yeah.
It's again, this is why I don't look at scores during any competition, whether I win or lose or whatever. I just don't care about that. It's just because those scores are all over the place. And Kyle and Sarah, for example, they judge very differently. You'll see Kyle places a 1 and Sarah places a dead last all the time. Everybody's a little different. I had a train of thought that I was going to go off of that, but I think that's enough from me anyway on that.
Yeah, totally.
If I could, if I could change one thing about the West Coast crowd, just like that's not super deep. I would change our support and training on the average, which is a completely unreasonable thing for me to say because no two people are
How
the
do you mean?
same. Well, because we talk about how much of a social dance this thing is, and I don't think it's right for me to say like everybody needs to go and spend X amount of hours and work on your shit and admit that like, oh, you're not hyping yourself in the right way or whatever spiel I may have that day. Everybody gets their own journey, but those who specifically want to be competitors or want to get better or, want to be a champion on the high end, they want to make this their living, be one of those 30 people who can travel the world. I still find that people find excuses all the time. Like they ask, like Delancey's my dance partner, and she's, in my opinion, one of the my personal top 5 in the world. That ever shifting top 5. And she's always asked like, well, what did you do? What did you do to become so good and win everything? Like she's going to say some magic, well, I took from this person or whatever. Because every time she says, I worked for 6 hours a day when I was younger.
Yeah, I worked really effing hard on my dancing.
Yeah, she did this annoying exercise that I hate that is really helpful. I hate it because it's...
We should have Delancey on sometime.
Yeah, in order to, I've talked to her a dozen times. She wants to be on the show, but we have to do it not at 3 p.m.
At a different time, yeah, so, for sure.
And that goes with a lot of other people I've talked to, but we'll set up other guests, you and me, and
yeah, we can move the time around a little bit.
Yeah, for sure. So anyway, the exercise she does a lot is the metronome exercise. She just turns on a metronome and works to stay just behind it, And when she tells that to people, she's like, I work on my triples over and over again. I work on whatever footwork, moving around the house, and I have a metronome on, or I turn on a very straight time song or a very swing time song, and I just do it over and over and over again. She's probably put in easily put in over 10,000 hours on it. And when you hear the work that it really takes to be a professional, it's a turnoff to a lot of people.
Sure, yeah.
But I don't want it to be. I want people to hear, again, completely unreasonable in my opinion, but I want more people to hear, it takes me 10,000 hours. All right, I better start now. I better go and do your exercise, person who just whipped my ever-loving ass in a competition. Yeah.
Yeah. I mean, I think that it's a great broad point about many different fields, right? There is a... Katie just ordered a metronome. It's a good thing to do.
Yeah.
Delancey has a wide variety of individual solo work exercises that I think are wonderful.
Yeah.
She's got a lot of great solo work ones. She shared one. We had a group practice session one time a while ago and I think it was at Bridgetown. And she shared one and it was thoroughly fantastic. There's this common kind of spectrum of work versus talent that we think about with a lot of things, and talent is really exciting. Talent's really fun to talk about. That person's so talented. And because we talk about talent all the time, we get kind of seduced by it, I think. But the bottom line is that if I have to pick between somebody who's really talented at something and somebody who's worked harder at it, I'm often going to pick the person who worked harder at it.
Yeah.
Because that just has so much more impact over the actual result that comes out of your body. We might all have different physical ceilings. It's okay to admit that. That's fine.
Sure.
But so few of us actually hit our physical ceiling that it's almost irrelevant. Sure, there might be some physical limitation that you have for whatever reason, but how often does it actually come up? And how common is it that people truly maximize their talent?
Yeah.
It's incredibly rare. And because of that, maybe at the toppest level, and you have all these people who've maximized their talent running into each other, sure. But even in West Coast Swing, I would argue that there are very few people who've truly maximized their talent.
I wouldn't say there's anybody who's maximized it.
Yeah. You could argue that maybe there's no one. I mean,
It's impossible.
I remember... Mm-hmm.
I'm sorry. No, you remember?
No, I just remember talking to various people, and one of my favorite questions to ask the top champions, if it's in a Q&A or whatever, is what are you working on right now?
Yeah.
And they're basically always really excited to talk about it because no one ever asked them that question.
Yeah.
Because they kind of assume that it's this finalized process,
yeah.
right? so like ask your teacher, what are you working on?
Yeah.
You know, like how are you improving your dancing? Not as a critique, not as a judgment, but just out of an honest, open curiosity about this idea that we are always Andrew Slack is at max talent. That is very true, Sonata. Thank you for
Yeah,
that.
yeah, yeah, yeah.
Over
I will give
9,000.
you. I am over 9,000, but I am. Yeah. Go watch the rest of that
Yeah,
show.
like
There's a
and Victor's
long
making
way
a
to go.
yeah, Victor's making a great point here. You know, like you cannot get better at things if you don't put in the effort. It's impossible. So if you really want to improve in your dancing, if you want to if you want to ask somebody ever, if the question is ever, how do I get out of novice, or how do I get out of intermediate, or how do I get out of advanced? It's do more dancing.
Yeah.
Work harder.
Yeah.
Like that's the answer. Every other answer is either a specific that exists inside of that bubble to kind of be helpful and provide guidance, or it's being polite to someone because you don't want to give them the actual answer, which is work harder. So that's sort of how I would think about this kind of training question as a whole.
I agree. We've got about 10 minutes left, so I want to answer Vivian's question, and then I like Melissa's subject for the next time. I think we can actually do that
That's
as
a
a
great
good
one.
closer. So Vivian Young
Yeah.
asks, Andrew, are there any workshops or intensives that can be offered at conventions to motivate dancers to train more? Yeah, actually have motivation-based workshops, because
Sure.
well, I teach one, Delancey and I teach one that's specifically about just like getting people hyped and understanding what they are good at. You know, we don't really focus on like your feet are out here, you need to do this here. It's more just like we get to pick a few people out of the crowd, and then everybody dances, and we pick a few more, everybody dances, and we really focus on like you're on time, you're perfectly on time, so maybe you can hit the beat differently, you know, giving suggestions here and there. And then we have people talk about their stories, and it's just we try to make people feel like better people, and therefore they're willing to try new things as dancers. In terms of other people offering stuff like that, I honestly have no idea. I don't know what Josh Sturgeon is doing these days, but he had a really great idea for a workshop, so I highly recommend hitting him up. If you can take from, oh my God, if you can take from John Kirkconnell and Alyssa, Kirkconnell routinely drops these nuggets that are just unbelievable. PJ has a bluntness about him that I absolutely love, and he's not rude. He's very tactful. And then if you happen to take from Brandy, and ask her those sorts of things, like, I need motivation. What do you do when you feel like shit? Brandy there's something when you open the floodgate of certain questions with Brandy, she sort of just goes to town.
She's happy to real talk you. Yeah, for sure.
And I'm sure there's more people, but in general, I don't see a whole lot of motivation-based workshops. It's a lot of vocab. And people, you know, I feel like a lot of pros are afraid to be very honest with what you're saying because it's your job. What if you say something that someone doesn't like, and what if they complain? I totally get it. But I'm not those other pros, so I'm not going to answer for them. Yeah, and then
I'm gonna
yeah, please.
Can I throw one little thing in here? All right, so one little thing is, and this has been one of my favorite subjects recently, so it's been like very, very present for me, which is why I'm bringing it up here. There is a really critical difference between motivation and discipline. And it's really important to understand the difference between those two things. And I think that so motivation, what Andrew's referring to here and what we're kind of discussing, is like it's the rocket fuel, right? It's what gets you in movement if you are not in movement, or gets you out of a rut if you are in a rut. That's one thing. Discipline is what keeps you in movement once you have begun to move.
Yeah.
And I think that in many ways we spend a lot of time culturally, just as a broader culture, talking and thinking about motivation.
Yeah.
But we spend relatively little time talking and thinking about discipline.
Agreed.
And often discipline is what actually kind of gets us the big results over time.
Yeah.
Because it's what sort of lets us sustain. And one of the things that I think really lets us sustain is just having like regular practices, like regular things that you do day after day after day as a kind of like reminder to keep yourself going. So in this example, I don't know if affirmations work for you. I don't know if reminding yourself of what your goals are work for you. I don't know if at the end of the day, um, writing down what you accomplished over the course of the day, or didn't accomplish over the course of the day,
Yeah.
works for you, whatever it might be. But those are all little tools that we have to kind of sustain discipline in an environment that is often very focused on motivation. So,
Yeah.
just a thought.
I agree, and I mean, for me, motivation in general, as like as an industry, is very poorly done because it focuses so hard on just that first initial part, like you're talking about. You know, that hype, that the adrenalization of somebody. For example, like Tony Robbins. I won't get into my personal thoughts on him too much.
Sure.
He does a lot of great work. I just don't personally subscribe to his way of thought because it is hyper adrenalized. Anyway. What does help me is Resilient by Forrest and Rick Hansen. How to grow an unshakable core of calm, strength, and happiness. And what I'm saying is having resources like this, having people that I can talk to like Forrest, that's what gets me going, keeping a nice social outlet and keeping passionate about the things I have with other people. That's what keeps me disciplined. And let's move on to the last bit. Just because I'm going to find another reason to hype your book. And for the record, I don't think you need it.
I tap out.
But it tickles me. So Melissa Smith says, I think the subject would be anyway. She says, how do you deal with feeling off, feeling shitty about your own dancing? What are some things you do when you're having an off night or social dancing? I don't dance if I really don't want to. I do it all the time. I do it so often that I need those nights to go and be a normal human being and not, someone who's supposed to be good at something. You know what I mean? I feel like there's, and this is most likely just all pressure that I put on myself. But when I go out dancing, I'm supposed to be a badass. I do it for a living. I've done it for a long time. I get hired to do shit. So I'm supposed to go out and be an example.
It's tough to be an example.
I hate it sometimes.
Yeah.
And I know that sounds so arrogant.
No, it's super true. I mean, like for me, I really enjoy taking classes and dances that I don't know and I'm not good at. Because I get to be a beginner again, and I get to be in an environment where like nobody gives a crap.
Yeah.
So
I agree.
It's nice.
And when I feel like shit, but I don't want to leave the dance, I pick one thing to work on, one thing that I know that I'm going to do well, that I can stretch, and I just do that over and over again. It doesn't even have to be a thing that anybody else can see. In fact, usually with me, it's not. It's like I'm going to tighten up here instead of releasing here. I'm going to work on tiny little intricate footwork that most people can't catch, or I'm going to lead from my hip in a different way, stuff like that. And I just do it all night. Or maybe it's I want to be funny tonight. You know what I mean? I pick a thing and I do it instead of worrying about absolutely everything.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
I think that for me, if I'm having a crappy dance night, the first thing that I do is I try to find some friends and chat them up for a minute, because I just get very buried in my head.
Yeah.
And I think that we can like kind of get that feeling where you're the mind is a dangerous neighborhood to sort of say. And,
that's a shirt.
And you can get kind of trapped in there, and you can start wandering down some pretty tricky rabbit holes.
Yeah.
And so just trying to extract from that, whether it's by taking a step away, not dancing a couple of songs, walking outside of the ballroom, chatting with some friends, getting a drink of water, whatever you can to kind of break the cycle, I think is a great place to start.
Yeah, I agree.
Then when I return to it, I kind of try to change what my goal is. So if I'm really taking a dump on myself because I feel bad and I don't know what I'm doing and I'm having crappy dances or whatever it is, I try to move my goal. I try to move it from being like a perfect dancer to having a fun time. Or I try to do what you were saying, Andrew, where I try to focus on like one element of my dancing.
Yeah.
And I say, okay, I'm going to set myself a challenge. And my challenge is going to be that in every dance that I have to do X.
Yeah.
Or I can't do Y. Like sometimes I'll feel myself getting
Oh,
trapped in a
yeah.
particular pattern.
Yeah.
And I'll just be like, every fucking dance I've had, I've led the same goddamn pattern. Like how, so I'll just be like, okay, the next one I am banned from that pattern.
Yeah.
And I'm not even just banned from that pattern, I'm banned from like any sequence that could possibly get me into that pattern. So then what do you do when like half of your vocabulary gets shut off? And I think that little things like that can often help sort of get us out of a rut.
Yeah.
So those are some of the little things that I try to do.
I like it. And yeah, I mean, I'll echo the social aspect. If you got a buddy, especially at a venue, and if you don't, bring someone, you know. Attack this as a team is sometimes a really wonderful thing. It's always better. I always feel more confident when like I get to hang out with you at an event, especially like when we've only slept a couple hours and your brain is going into weird places. Nice with the eyebrows. That's good. Yeah. When Forrest and I have been making sweet love all night long.
It's just a matter of time. There are going to be some really weird fan fictions that come out.
I
of
hope
this,
so.
this
I want to be
podcast.
that kind of famous. I want us to have like a subreddit that's nothing but slash fiction. Oh, it's going to be awesome.
West Coast Live fan fiction.
Oh, it'll be
I
great.
like it.
And since you and I are really like, it's you, me, and Shanti so far. It's going to be just like Shanti with popcorn, and yeah, it'll be awesome. Okay. That's what we're going to end on, really.
And on that note,
Okay, so
great episode, guys.
I loved this. Thank you for putting up with a more mellow episode today, Forrest. I really appreciate it. I needed it. So
Super happy to.
and those of you that joined now, one of the big reasons I needed it is because I really want a sort of call it a waveform with our show. Some episodes are going to be a little deeper. Some are going to be like, woo! And some are going to be, oh, that was nice. And because I've been working for, I'm not even kidding, 20 years as a dancer, as an entertainer, and this opportunity presented itself. I've talked about it on a previous episode. It was an audition to be a part of my Jazz Heroes new company. And I just now got the text from him. He's like, I know you know this already, but I would like to formally invite you to be a part of my company and for our new show, The Mad Reckless. And so, yeah, we're talking about hard work and training today because of that, because I've worked all this time to be at this point, and I still have so far to go, you know?
That's awesome. Yeah.
Yeah, he flat out told us that it's going to take about 2 years for all of us to get up to snuff with his basic dancers. Mm-hmm. And that's amazing to me. I can't even tell you how grateful I am for that. And you'll hear all about it. Also, I'm starting a petition for Forrest to move to Portland. So if you have any job openings, if you have beds, open arms.
You're gonna have to fight Mike Anderson because he's been trying to get me to move to San Diego.
That's fine. That's fine.
A solid couple
Mike,
of years.
Mike doesn't have. Okay, I was gonna say beer, but he does. Also, it would kill you. We have. Oh crap. I'll come up with something. I also had a thing. Oh, that's in terms of the show. If you're. What the? Get it, mofo? Oh, thanks, Andrew. Okay, so. In terms of the show, if there are people, if you would like to be on the show and we've had a conversation in real life, hit us up via our new West Coast Live page. Just send a message through the page and we will talk about it and get you on the show. When you do, I want you to give us what you want to talk about. The show is about the guests. That's why like Forrest is usually the one talking, is because I want to hear his opinion. I hear my shit all the time. And on top of that, Facebook is very flighty. So starting next week, we're going to be broadcasting through a different service. We're going to be going through Twitch. We will still post the link through the Facebook page. You can still see it on Facebook. We'll still answer questions. But Twitch is just a really amazing, an amazing service where if you want to show support, you can. If you want to be part of the conversation, you can. Plus, it makes it so much easier to save the video so we can, archive it and not just lose this stuff in the ether. Because I think I'm really proud of what we've done so far. This has far exceeded my expectations, man.
Aw,
So anyway, again, thank you to Black Rose Fitness Society for being our sponsor for this run. Thank you so much, Forrest, for always being a source of wisdom and eloquence. I value you
thank you,
so
man.
much.
Likewise.
And advice for everybody out there: if you have a dream, if you have anything that you love, go and do it, and go fight for it as hard as you can. And especially if you're willing to just work your ass off for it, just keep going. And if you ever need a little kick in the ass or support, know that we're here for you. But that's going to be it from us. My name is Andrew Slack. This is Forrest Hanson. Oops, just covered your face. Thank you. Thank you for being here, and we will see you again next time.
Thank you, guys.